try to watch my time here. I'm going to do something a little bit different. So last week, you give me 2 weeks a year for time away for education. And last week, I took one of those weeks, and I went on a retreat. And it's something I do every November, and so I went on a retreat to a little hermitage, the DeSales Retreat Center in Brooklyn, Michigan. So in the Irish Hills and this sort of thing. And over the last few months, I have been reading a lot of Franciscan theology and spirituality, and I've joined the Friends of the Order of Lutheran Franciscans, and so anyway. But now, the whole thing about Franciscan theology, it is Christian, Trinitarian, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but the Franciscans focus a great deal on all of creation. They see every animal, mineral, vegetable, and person as a unique reflection of God's love coming together to create a new world. This is the way the Franciscans see things. And so consequently, there's this awe of all that is going on all around us and what can be seen. And it's a powerful thing. And so I studied for another week and prayed and reflected on some of this. And I want to at least mention some of the key influences that I'm going to kind of riff on a little bit. And I want to at least give note to that. Certainly St. Francis of Assisi, St. Clare of Assisi, Richard Rohr, the poet Rilke, Father Dan Riley, St. Bonaventure, and then the Gospels of Matthew and John. So all of those pieces kind of were working in this whole thing. So I leave Monday morning, I go, I drive down US 12 heading to Brooklyn, and I have this whole Franciscan thing going on in my head, and I'm driving through Chelsea and then through Clinton, and as I'm driving through, I'm like falling in love with the towns, with the people. I imagine all the sacredness and dysfunction, but I'm sensing life in a new way. And that's what happens when you get into this Franciscan thing. It was very powerful. It was a wonderful thing. And finally, I got to Brooklyn. I finally got to my hermitage. I sat down and I got ready to go. And I noticed that this year would be a little bit different than others. It would be a little less quiet, I suppose, because just across the way from my place is a novitiate, which is a big, big house where young men determine if they're going to become priests. And it's a good thing, nothing bad about that. Well, this year there were 5 young men in that house determining whether or not they would be priests. And these young men come and go, and they have much more energy than I do, and I'm thinking about that, and it's an interesting thing, but it added to the whole thing. So one of the things that with the way of Francis, everything is sacred. So everything is sacred, and life is sacred. Everything. And so what happens is with the Franciscans particularly is they recognize, as Jesus would recognize, pain and suffering. So when there is dysfunction in the world, when there is pain and suffering, and the recognition that everything is sacred, well, then the question becomes why? Why is there this pain and suffering? And what can we do about it? It's a natural kind of question. And so fighting for the poor and the oppressed is a standard bill of fare in this way of looking at things. And that probably doesn't sound too foreign to us. One of the things that you pick up quickly with Francis and Clare is that the focus of how they move forward is in voluntary poverty. These are both people, and a lot of people that followed them, that came from relative wealth. They listened to the gospel of Jesus and the story of the rich man, and they chose to give up everything to follow Jesus. They became poor, radically poor. They gave up everything, and it caused quite an uproar. And but this is what they did, and this was the way. And the thing about it is that and you know what? And all of us can identify with this. Most of us can on some level. Many of us are in the downsizing mode, right? You know, we're giving away stuff where things are shrinking, things are changing. And partly what happens, I think, for all of us is we have these little mini epiphanies. I really never needed that. Whatever that is. Or I forgot the use of it. This type of thing. But the point would be that in voluntary poverty, what we are doing is we are trying to get closer to our relationship with God, recognizing that stuff can sometimes be a disturbance to that. So that's something that comes through very clear. And the thing about that is that the world fights against we don't talk about voluntary poverty anyway. It's not like something you talk a lot about. But certainly the world in which we live is going to do everything possible to extract every last dollar out of us. That sounds a little crude, but you know what I mean. You know, there's always something more to do, something more to get. And so this whole idea of voluntary poverty it's hard to the modern ear. It was awful in Assisi. They thought they were crazy. So, you know, this is just the way it works. Anyway, as I'm reflecting on all this stuff, I'm sitting on my porch and I'm listening to the birds, and I was watching for days this tree next to my hermitage, and there was a squirrel that lives in it. They go up and down, you know. And he had kind of a schedule, but anyways, I'm sitting on my porch, I'm watching all this, and I see this falcon up there circling around. And I said, God, I wonder if he's looking for my friend the squirrel, right? But the thing that I thought about this, though, as I'm getting more into this idea of just the sacredness of life, I wondered, to God, is my voice any more important than a bird's song? A dog's bark, a cat's meow, a fox's cry, any more important than the sounds of rustling leaves that are going to do whatever Ashley said they would do if we don't rake them? Creaking trees. It makes you wonder sometimes, what's the most important thing? But as I'm reflecting on that, there go those young novices again with all their vitality, running by, doing whatever they're doing. And it was an interesting thing. This is something that I thought about, and maybe you've all thought about it once in a while, and this is something I've thought about periodically for at least 50 years, thereabouts, when thinking about the Industrial Revolution, of which we are part of, and this is where it's at. But the question, it's just a question, what would happen if commerce came to a grinding halt and there would be a sabbatical on technological development? And all that energy would redirect itself to resolving poverty in the world. What would happen? It's an interesting question. And it's something that, as we try to connect ourselves to the living God and do the work, it's something just to think about. A couple thoughts. I'll go right to Richard Rohr here, because I think these are almost quotes. Interesting thing. Rohr is saying in all this ministry that we are doing, to do something good with bad energy is simply bad. It's bad. You can do something good, but if it's with bad energy, it's just bad. So the key is to do things with a sense of joy and passion and this type of thing. Not as a grudge or as a, well, I've got to do this, right? He said, the greatest enemy of ordinary goodness is the demand for perfection. The greatest enemy of ordinary goodness is the demand for perfection. Interesting thought. We can, in an attempt to become perfect, we can dehumanize, eh? There's a potential. A thought that Christ, the idea of Christ is reflecting on who we truly are. So in other words, when we see Christ, we are seeing our true self. The true self, okay? Not the self that is distanced from it, but that's the true self. That's connected to the idea that we are children of God. We are all created in God's image. And when we see Christ, that's the true self. And that's the challenge that we have moving forward, sharing God's love, being God's hands and feet. I got another Richard Rohr thing here, I think. I think this is Rohr. He says, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking more than think ourselves into new ways of living. Action, work, involvement. This is what our great teachers are, right? We can learn all this stuff up here. We can have all the head knowledge in the world. It's maybe not as important. One of the thoughts that, in looking at this whole idea of human pain and suffering and so on, the question kind of popped throughout the literature is this idea of, are we awake? Are we awake to the stuff Christ is calling us to be concerned with? Are we awake? A term that's been used called woke, but it's been maligned. But the part of it is ultimately the intentionality in understanding pain and suffering. I mean, but this is what theologians will say. There's dangers in becoming awake. There are real dangers, and the dangers are connected to a threat to power, to prestige, to possessions. Just a thought. Just read about these novices again. You know, I think I've got a problem with youth in that maybe I wish I had a little more of it. But I'm walking on the path to the chapel, and I realize my gait is so different than theirs. They walk so much more briskly. And I don't know, maybe it's an ego thing. Anyway, I got a few more thoughts for you. I'm going to go through this. This is a thought that I'm lifting out of Bonaventure, this particular thought. But the thought was this, that you can go deep into any one place. You can go deeper and deeper into what you are into. You can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you will meet all people in all places at a certain point. Because in the end, we are all looking for that purpose, our identities, and moving forward. Duns Scotus, I'll give you a Duns Scotus, I did mention him too. Jesus did not come to change God's mind about humanity. Jesus did not. This is important. He did not come to change God's mind about humanity. Rather, he came to judge humanity's mind about God. That God is love. God is compassion. God is mercy, justice, and forgiveness. I had a mystical, well, maybe all this is a little mystical, but I'm reflecting on Rilke, and this is I just have to read something like this. It just came from a retreat. Looking up at the stars, I wonder if someone somewhere is looking up at us as a distant star. The universe is large. Creation is even larger. And we are a part of it. You know, here's the thing. So, in looking at all of this stuff, what I'm sensing and is, again, our faith is an organic thing. We are uniquely gifted. We are called into understanding the importance of sharing God's love, which particularly focuses on the poor. And we all do it already in different ways. We're already in the zone. Some may be doing more than others, but think about your life, kind of a Franciscan-y thing, but think of your life and think of your ministry as a sidewalk ministry. Think of the fact that, you know what, I've got God's love, and I can carry it with me, and I can share it with anybody, simply by smiling and saying hi. Just connecting. Go slower. Get to know the waitress. Tip him or her generously. Just enjoy what God has brought to each of us. And we are already doing it, all of us, on some level, but we can always try to do more. Well, that's what I learned. I learned more than that, but we don't want to keep going. But I pray that maybe something that was shared will spark something in you, that there's some value in that, and that my time was spent not in vain, as you allowed me to become educated a little more. Amen.